Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Back in 2006, I picked up a book, Malcolm Gladwell's book, Blink. I had read other books of his, fascinating stuff. Blink, the subtitle is The Power of Thinking Without Thinking. And I picked up his book because I had enjoyed his other work, and Tipping Point was the first one that kind of came out. It was fascinating to me. That led me into reading a lot of stuff by Adam Grant, and I love this. I love the type of book where it's all relating back to actual research, right? It's people telling stories, and it's not just conjecture. It's like, hey, there's something going on, and somebody's actually studying this stuff. So it certainly lends some credibility to it. I know that people try to poke holes in those things, and we'll leave that for another podcast. That's not mine. But in the book Blink, it starts out with a story about a jade statue. It was a green statue, I believe, and this museum was going to take it. And they're like, okay, is this authentic or is this not authentic? And they had experts looking at it, and all the experts were saying, yeah, it's authentic. And they tested it 6 ways to Sunday, and or maybe it's 7 ways to Sunday. I don't know. But anyhow, they tested it up and down and did all sorts of testing on it. And then there was one person who was like, yeah, it just doesn't feel right. It just doesn't feel right. No, this is what the logic is telling us, but it just doesn't feel right. And lo and behold, it wasn't right. It wasn't. It was a fake. I don't want to say a forgery, but it wasn't original. It wasn't this ancient statue. And I don't know if the person who tried to bring it to the museum was trying to pass it off, or maybe they were duped. Somebody was duped along the line. It really doesn't matter. The point behind it is that there was somebody there was just something there that was just screaming at them. We'll call it a gut reaction, just saying, this isn't right. And that was really my first introduction to the notion that there's things going on in our brain. We have abilities, we have thoughts, we have senses, and they're all very, very subconscious. And I have been fascinated by these sorts of things. I don't pass them off as woo-woo sorts of things. There are things going on. Today, my guest is Judy Kane, and Judy owns a business called Align Consciousness, and she provides Psych K facilitation for individuals and groups. And what Psych K does is it helps clients change self-limiting beliefs into positive goals. And self-limiting beliefs are kind of those little subconscious things that, we feel we're not afraid of the dark or whatever, but we're really afraid of the dark, or whatever it is, afraid of spending money. And there are just things there in our subconscious mind. Anyhow, Judy, welcome to Networking RX.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
I guess just, you and I've known each other. You'll tell people you help people take out their head trash.
I do.
Yeah, which is a neat little tagline. It kind of gets people to kind of sit up and listen. And it's more complicated than that. I guess give us a quick story how you got into this. And
yeah, it was a really obvious journey from IT management to this.
Yeah, there you go.
Pretty straightforward. But I didn't have a lot of exposure to alternative ways of changing things in your life or with your well-being. I didn't disbelieve much, but I hadn't had much exposure. But when I was married to my second husband, he had a lot of friends that were very well versed in all sorts of different modalities. And he had a ache or a pain somewhere at one point in time. And one of his friends asked if he wanted him to help, and he said sure. And I was watching, and usually when they did things, they were mysterious, right? I couldn't tell what they were doing. I wouldn't have had the first clue as to how to try to do that myself. In this case, it was a very straightforward process, and it didn't involve interpreting messages or sensing where energy was going. It's just a straightforward process. It appealed to my IT brain. And it got rid of his ache or pain, or within 5 minutes it was gone and didn't come back. So I was impressed with the result and really interested in the process. So that was when I started. I got ready to learn how to do this myself, because it's just too good to not pay attention to.
Yeah. So can you describe the process, the Psych-K, and I mean, not, essentially you're identifying where people have hangups. So you go ahead, you talk about it.
Sure. So a lot of what I do when I'm working with somebody is not the process itself. It's figuring out where the block is so that we can then change it. And we use Psych-K to do the change itself, which is it's a very fast change process. Usually you can change any one belief in less than 5 minutes. So it's very straightforward. The art of it is finding where the beliefs are that are contributing to the situation. So when I meet with somebody, I ask them what's going on and what would they rather experience, right? What is it they want to be true? And a lot of times people don't think of that themselves. They are focused on what they don't want to happen, what they're trying to avoid. They don't really sit down and think about what do they really want. But so we get to that, and then we try to figure out what beliefs would support that being true. And then we find where the disconnects are.
Gotcha. Is this a fair statement? Everybody's got head trash.
Everybody's got head trash. And it really is, trash wasn't always trash. These beliefs served a purpose at some point in time, just like trash hopefully served a purpose once in its life, right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's, we have fears, there's fight or flight. And that's holdover from a time where there were a lot of really bad things on a daily basis right around the corner. And, so yeah, there are things there.
There are, and they still seem that way. And that's what's influencing us, right? There are things that scare us or make us uncomfortable, or, one way or another, they're influencing our behavior.
Yeah. I like to look at these things. This is a podcast on professional relationships. I like to look at these things through the lens of relationships. And, when somebody has head trash, it's kind of like alcoholism. You're never really an alcoholic alone, right? I mean, you might spend time alone, but it's impacting somebody.
Yes.
And so when you're having these issues, it's impacting relationships and how people interact. I don't know if you can share any stories. Obviously, we leave names out of it, but
right. Yeah. No, I never tell names and stories at the same time. Before the story, it's like what you're saying is so true. The subconscious beliefs form our entire perception of other people and events and ourselves. So that's where it gets into the relationships of one person's intent can be perceived differently by the person who's observing it or receiving it. And so it really does it influences everything. They say that 95% of our behavior is pretty much controlled by our subconscious beliefs.
Yeah. As you were saying that, I was kind of thinking of the notion of dueling head trash, right? I mean, I might have, and I'm not making light of it, but I might have some sort of head trash, and somebody else has head trash that interprets my head trash, my behaviors, in a totally different way than intended. And that sends them careening off into wherever else. And again, dueling head trash. I mean, it's
Absolutely. Yes. And once you can change one of those beliefs, you start behaving differently.
Yeah.
Which makes people react to you differently or respond to you differently.
Right.
And whole situations can change. So it's fascinating to see the impact and watch the interactions with people.
Yeah.
But back to the business relationships and a story. So I've had clients that are feeling like there's not enough business for them, for everybody, right? There's a scarcity mentality of what's available for them. And so they tend to approach all the business deals. And this is one person I'm thinking of in particular. It was very competitive, right? There's fear-based because there's not enough, and it's competitive of, you got to go after that, single client that's out there because there aren't any more.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that causes a lot of stress, and it doesn't promote healthy relationships with people that work with you or collaborators or just general networking people. And so, the stress of the constant scarcity mentality is what we were working with. And you can, when you can change the belief to be there's enough business there for everybody, right?
Right.
You can, this kind of eased up on the stress. It was easier to make connections and form better business relationships. You become nicer, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you're not looking over your shoulders as you're talking. I'm thinking about my tenure in public accounting in the corporate world. It's not that I don't see it in the entrepreneurial world. I think in the entrepreneurial world, there is a lot more abundance mentality. There's a lot more cooperation. For the most part, we're interacting with people who aren't doing exactly what we're doing. But when you're in an accounting firm or a law firm and everybody's kind of really doing the same thing, yeah, there can be a scarcity mentality. And I've seen people who have become, well, I'll call it territorial, um, not wanting to share information, um, hoarding work. You have more on your plate locked away in your desk than you can possibly get done by the deadline. Why have you done this? And it's a hoarding mentality. Not hoarding, a scarcity mentality. I've saw people who were very reluctant to train people up for fear of working themselves out of a job or training their competitor. And ironically enough, that was really their undoing because the firm's like, listen, you've limited yourself. If you're not going to train somebody, you can only work so many hours. But if you train 3 people to do it, then you take on a different managerial role. If you're not willing to do that, then we have to move you on. And I never really thought about, I knew there were issues there. I never really thought about, okay, maybe there's something underlying there. Maybe it's something that happened to them when they were a child or happened to a parent, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You get most of your subconscious beliefs by the time you're 7.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Dad.
right? I mean, but they got it by the time they were 7,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You know,
Well, I had somebody on the show who talked about when we enter into a relationship, enter into a marriage, there are really 8 relationships coming together. It's like your relationship with your spouse, your relationship with your mom, your relationship with your dad, and then their relationship with each other. And then you have the whole other side who has their 4. And you can, you know, to me, that was very enlightening because it's like, okay, you can see why people have trouble. You
yeah,
know, he or she comes from a family where there was a lot of money. Um, they parents did well or the grandparents did well and there was stock and, saving for college was not a thing to worry about at least. I just need to check. That's all. Go to the go to the magic tree and get me money. And then other people where it's like, you know what, it's I got to get a job. I got to be careful with my money. So
absolutely. And I was talking with somebody the other day that the message she got growing up was that women were not supposed to do anything with money except give it away. They weren't supposed to earn it.
mm-hmm. Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. They weren't supposed to do anything with it except pass it on,
Yeah.
which makes it really hard to earn a living if you've got that belief.
Right. So you're through Site K, you're helping people solve this. And are there things that trigger it again, or it's just
So lots of times there are multiple beliefs contributing to one situation.
right?
So that's the thing, people often say, well, this is the issue. How many sessions do I need? And it's like,
Yeah.
I have no idea other than if it's a phobia. I've never had a client I haven't had them take a full session. Certainly I haven't had them take more than one session, but other things can be more complex.
Right.
Right. Um,
Well, if it's subconscious, how do you know? I was talking to somebody about subconscious behavior,
mhm,
subconscious thoughts, right?
mhm.
And they were so sure that they were so smart that they could outwit their subconscious. And it's like, how could you possibly do that?
Well, you can't, 5% of the time when you're focusing, when you're using your conscious mind,
Right.
that's when you can bypass the subconscious. But
Right.
the other 95% of the time, it's your default system.
Yeah. Yeah. I was
So you can't.
no, well, I know. I think it was a function of this person being so intelligent that, in fact, I read a study that people who um, have these unconscious biases, people who are really smart have the worst ones because they are really smart and they, in their mind, they imagine, okay, I can work myself around this. And in
Mhm.
reality, they paint themselves even further into a corner because of
That
their,
could be very true. I've never looked at it from that standpoint,
yeah,
but yeah, that could be. I mean,
yeah,
yeah, but how it's something, well, one way you can tell if it's subconscious is looking for the patterns of, patterns that don't make sense or that are not in agreement with what your conscious goals are.
yeah. I, when you talk, I think of the mythical god or the mythical figure Sisyphus,
Yeah.
who rolled the boulder up the hill and it kept rolling back down.
Yeah.
And that's where you kind of see it out there. It's like, okay, they get the business to here and they can't quite, something comes they might lose their job and then start over, or um, not close a deal. Everything's great, and then it's just something they just do something that mess it up. Um, yeah, I don't know.
Sometimes you see it where it's real self-sabotage, and other times it's like the forces of the universe are conspiring against them.
Right.
What I see frequently with people is they will make just enough, but if they make more, it suddenly has to go somewhere else,
Mm,
right? So they can't accumulate it. They'll just make enough. And one of the beliefs that I have seen be true for well over 90% of my clients is that it's not okay to have more than you need, which goes back to conflicting money beliefs, right? I mean, it's a measure of success, but many households, there's also something wrong about having money or too much money.
Yeah.
And so you've got those conflicting money beliefs that are there that are really difficult to work through.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. And I'm sure people run into issues with, I don't know if I can handle this next level. I'm very comfortable on this plateau, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what does that mean? Am I going to have to hire somebody? And if I hire somebody, maybe hire somebody else, and maybe then there's infighting with the person that's already there, and I don't want to have to deal with that. So I'm just going to kind of keep myself on this plane here, this
Yeah.
plateau.
Yeah.
And of course, outwardly, you're like, no, I'm going to make it work, rah, rah, rah. And I don't know, it's all very interesting.
It is, and particularly when that happens, where you're really spending some time and thought and energy on creating stories of how it could be a problem, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, one of the things that I encourage people to do if they're trying to work through this on their own is to picture the ways it's going to look when it's working the way you want it to work. Picture the examples of how it's going to be, and sometimes that can make a difference in the way things are rolling out for them. But yeah, you want to have a really clear picture of what it is that you want, how it's going to look, how it's going to feel, all the details and several examples of when this is true, this is what's going to be happening, right?
Yeah.
That can go a long ways.
Yeah. Let's shift gears here a little bit as we close in to wrap up. Let's talk about aligned consciousness, the work you do, how people can get a hold of you.
Sure.
What you're looking for. How can people help you?
I like knowing that people understand that what's going on is something that can be changed.
Right.
And that it's not, a lot of times people blame themselves when things aren't working out well. And, they don't understand that it's the subconscious beliefs that are causing these things.
Right.
So I really like getting the message out. So if anybody's out there that wants me to speak to a group or be on another podcast, that would be excellent. If it's something that people have that they want to change themselves, I've got a website, alignedconsciousness.com. People can book a 15-minute free call. I'm always happy to talk about what they might want to change. And if they have more questions about the actual process.
Okay. I'll put that in the show notes. Can they contact you through the website?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll get that in there. Judy, fascinating. Appreciate your time.
Thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed our conversation, as I always do.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AMSPIRIT.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.